Vladimir Putin lied, and I'm not exaggerating. It's a fact, down to the exact time. And what happened after that lie was so big that the Russian government had to declare a state of emergency. This is the story of the greatest revenge in 4 years of war. On May 9th, Putin publicly accepted a 3-day truce with Ukraine, brokered by Donald Trump. He told Russian reporters that the war was coming to an end. There was a prisoner exchange, handshakes, and headlines around the world talking about peace. And while all this was happening in silence, the Russian troops in eastern Ukraine were doing something else. They were regrouping, fortifying camps and trenches, and stockpiling the largest arsenal of drones and missiles that Russia had ever prepared for a single attack. The truce ended at midnight on the 11th, 48 hours later. The sky over Kyiv caught fire. 1,567 drones, 56 missiles. An entire 9-story building collapsed on sleeping families. 24 people died. 3 of them were children. It was the largest airstrike of the war in 4 years. And it was at that moment that something changed in Kyiv. Ukraine decided it wasn't gonna let it slide. What happened in the next 48 hours changed everything. In half a dozen Russian regions at the same time. And what was at stake went far beyond oil and bombers. Today, you'll see what Ukraine did in those 48 hours, and why it confirmed something that Putin is desperately trying to hide. To understand the revenge, you need to understand one thing first. Putin didn't accept the truce because he believed in peace. He accepted it because he needed time. Time to prepare a bigger attack. And it's not speculation. The Institute for the Study of War in Washington has documented every move. Putin was not seeking peace. He was loading the weapon. When the truce ended at midnight on the 11th, no one imagined what would happen in the next 48 hours. On the 13th, the attacks began. 800 drones in successive waves hit cities from east to west, including regions that had never been bombed before. But that was just the warm-up. On the 14th, Russia launched the largest airstrike of the entire war. In 48 hours, 1,567 drones and 56 missiles rained down on Ukraine. Ukrainian defenses managed to shoot down 94% of the drones, but only 7% of the missiles. Through that gap, death entered. In Kyiv, in the Darnitsia district, a 9-story building was hit by a ballistic missile in the middle of the night. Entire walls collapsed onto crowded apartments. 24 people died. 3 of them were children. The youngest was 12 years old. Another 48 were injured. About 20 were still missing when the sun rose. The mayor of Kyiv declared official mourning. Volodymyr Zelensky called the military commanders for an emergency meeting and gave a single order: to plan the response. Do you know what's even more impressive? From Zelensky's order to the first missiles falling on Russian territory, less than 24 hours passed. In a single day, Ukraine organized a coordinated operation in 6 different regions of Russia, from the Sea of Azov to the Caspian Sea. Normally, armies take weeks to do that. Putin had bet on a formula that worked in the early years of the war: terrorize civilians, crush morale, force concessions. But that formula no longer works, and he was the last to realize that Ukraine won't give in anymore. Ukraine fights back. It took Putin 3 years to understand that. He paid dearly for the delay. The retaliation began at 2 in the morning on the 15th. At that hour, hundreds of kilometers inside Russian territory, residents of the city of Ryazan heard the first explosion, then the second, then the 10th. A resident of the city, in an interview with the independent Russian press, said that friends with relatives at the local refinery were warned that night not to go to work. The target was the Ryazan refinery, the fourth largest in Russia. It processes 17 million tons of oil per year. And it has one crucial detail. 840,000 tons of this single facility's annual production are aviation kerosene, the fuel that the Russian aerospace forces use to refuel the fighter jets that bomb Kiev. In other words, Ukraine attacked the fuel tank of the war machine that had killed 24 people 2 days earlier. And here's what hurts the Kremlin the most. The Ukrainian drones didn't hit just any part of the refinery. They hit exactly the distillation units, the technical heart of refining. Without them, the plant doesn't produce a single drop of fuel. And rebuilding takes months, probably more than a year. When the sun rose over Ryazan, the inhabitants woke up to something no one expected. Black, oily drops running down the windows, cars covered by a dark film, marks clinging to doors, playground toys, and balconies. The Russians called it oil rain. The international media used its technical name, black rain. This phenomenon had only happened 3 times in modern history: Hiroshima after the atomic bomb, Kuwait during the Gulf War, and Tehran 2 months ago. Now it was the turn of a Russian city with 500,000 inhabitants, 180 kilometers southeast of Moscow. The regional government declared a state of emergency. Schools and daycare centers were closed, and in the following hours, an embarrassing detail emerged. One of the residential buildings hit during the night was not struck by a Ukrainian drone. It was hit by a missile from Russia's own air defense, fired in an attempt to intercept the drones, but it missed its target. Russia bombed its own building. Picture the scene. The anti-aircraft system that was supposed to protect the Russian citizen from the Ukrainian drone ended up falling on that same citizen. Putin put at risk the lives of the people he swore to protect, and there's even a video showing the moment when this happened. The Kremlin may deny it, but the footage is there. But Ryazan was just one part. On the same night, in a coordinated operation, Ukraine hit 5 more Russian regions. In the city of Yeysk on the Sea of Azov, drones completely destroyed a rare Beriev-type amphibious plane. An aircraft valued at more than $40 million, capable of landing on both water and land. Russia has only a few of these and can't produce more because of Western sanctions. Each one destroyed is a loss that can't be replaced. They also hit an anti-submarine helicopter that was wrapped in anti-drone nets. The nets weren't enough. In Kaspisk on the Caspian Sea, the Ukrainians attacked the base of the Russian Caspian Fleet, hitting a missile ship and a minesweeper. In occupied Crimea, another Russian anti-aircraft system was destroyed. In the Luhansk region, another 23 military targets in a single night. And behind this operation, there was a name, Major Robert Brovdy, known to Ukrainians as Magyar, the commander of Ukraine's drone forces. The man who coordinated each of the 23 targets hit that night. It wasn't revenge, it was a message. But here's the question the Kremlin can no longer ignore. How is it possible to hit so many targets spread from the Sea of Azov to the Caspian Sea in a single night against the second largest military power on the planet? The answer lies in the weapons that did this. The long-range Ukrainian drones that destroyed Ryazan cost $55,000 each. They are built with plywood, plastic, and carbon fiber of the same type used in racing bicycles. The company that manufactures the most of them is called Firepoint. And 3 years ago, before the Russian invasion, Firepoint was an agency that hired actors for movies in the Ukrainian capital. The company worked on a 2016 romantic comedy starring the then comedian you may have heard of, Volodymyr Zelensky. Stop and think about that. Before 2022, this company was calling actors and actresses to appear in silly Ukrainian Hollywood movies. Today, it burns the billion-dollar Russian refinery. And there's more detail about Firepoint. Among the company's advisors is former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And do you know what that means? That the West understands how important this company is and is supporting it. In Moscow, the reaction was silence. The Russian state media took hours to acknowledge the attack on Ryazan. When it did, the Kremlin said it had everything under control. That only some drone debris had fallen. That the refinery was operating normally. But at the same time, the governor of the Russian region himself was declaring a state of emergency. Schools closed, daycares closed, firefighters working for hours, and the sky over Ryazan dark with smoke. Putin can lie once. But this time, the lie had video evidence. And satellite footage. And here's what that single night proved. Ukraine managed to hit, in a coordinated operation, targets that stretch from one end of Russian territory to the other, from the Sea of Azov to the Caspian Sea. 2,000 kilometers separate the farthest points. The Russian air defense system, which cost billions to build, was not able to protect even one of those targets. The message to Putin was clear. There is no longer any safe place within Russian territory. Not a refinery, not a military airport, not a naval base, not even the skies over Moscow on the most important day of the Russian calendar. And now Putin has two paths. He can escalate again with more attacks against Ukrainian civilians, like the one in Kyiv. He can try to take even greater revenge. Ukrainian intelligence has already leaked that the Kremlin is planning to attack Zelensky's own office in the coming weeks. And Belarus, increasingly pressured by Russia, could officially enter the war at any moment. But there's a problem. Every time Putin escalates, Ukraine will now respond, and it will respond inside Russian territory, with weapons that cost as much as an economy car, and that the Kremlin can't stop. Remember the first sentence of this video? Vladimir Putin lied about peace. And he found out in the most expensive week of his term that Ukraine stopped pretending not to see. In a single night in half a dozen Russian regions, the war entered a new phase. A phase in which Putin can no longer hide what is happening. Not even from himself. Not even from Russia. Not even from the world. And you, what do you think? Is Putin a strategist plotting disaster? Or is he just a dictator who has already lost touch with reality? Leave your answer here in the comments. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what's happening. And subscribe to the channel so we can keep following this story together. See you next time.